This is The Uncharted Life with Jacob Lyles. Good morning, everyone. This is Jacob, and this is the Uncharted Life podcast. Today, I have a conversation for you with a good friend of mine, Matt English. Matt is also a graduate of the class of Wake Forest 2005, and we go back, way back to then. That is an awkward way to say it, but we went to college together. I'm recording this podcast with Matt at his Winston-Salem, North Carolina home. For some of that time, we're out on his screen porch, and we'll have the chirp of the cicadas in the background as they accompany our podcast. Matt and I talk about parenting a child with autism, and we also wax poetic about video games and what we've learned from them and their role in our lives. This episode is a little bit of an experiment for me. I am experimenting in particular with audio editing. I wanted to release a version that cut straight to the meat of the conversation, and because I feel like there's some really powerful content here, and I thought some people might not want to listen through our introductory banter, but they might be interested in the real meat of the conversation when Matt talks about raising his son. And to make this an experiment, I'm also releasing the unedited version as a separate track, so you can listen to either one. And let me know what you think. As always, to support the podcast, you can subscribe to us on any podcast app, especially the Apple Podcast app. And if you do so, and you have the time to leave us a rating, that would help. It helps people find us, and I appreciate it. So here is my conversation with Matt English, the edited version.
For me, one of the most powerful lessons I learned as a dad was that one, oh man, I mean, you don't even know that those things are ingrained, you know? Like, when you have a child, you are bringing into that conversation a just bevy of latent expectations that you probably don't even know are there, right? A huge amount of them come from like Madison Avenue and the whole, Norman Rockwell, did he do those paintings with like the family eating the, I always get those names wrong.
I think Norman Rockwell is
he the one who did like
I think it's a good guess.
Right? Andy Warhol. That's who I wanted, right? The American family paintings with the Thanksgiving dinner and the idyllic setting, right? And the two-car garage and the college degree. And you are definitely bringing those in. And there is that is a fucking awful thing. I mean, you think about that. I mean, you're not even in the world yet, and somebody's got a list of things you need to do, right? And they're big things. Probably a lot of them are out of your control, you being the child. And, man.
Yeah, I'm used to thinking of that from the other side, and like how much I hate for my parents to like decide my life for me already.
Yeah.
But like hearing you speak about it makes me realize that like I do have those expectations myself, and so I'd probably would have I'd like there'd be some way that I'd be imposing that on a kid, even if I wasn't doing it explicitly.
Right. And I think it's fine I think it's not a healthy spot to sort of look at it, like just to stare at it, like have a macabre fascination with your own expectation and feel guilty about it. And maybe that's just because I do that as being raised Catholic, and so I'm like, don't do that, guys. But I think that it is healthy, though, that you even are at the place where you kind of can go, I know those are probably there, right? And I think that's a great starting point. Because, I mean, you kind of got to be looking for them. I mean, I'll just give you some that I didn't even know were there. So both my parents talked significantly about, well, when I was 18, my parents gave me $50 and put me in the armed forces, and I was on my own, right? Well, think about what that instills in you. And then you have a child who, by no fault of their own, probably will never be independent, right? So what is it? What do you have to untangle internally about what that says about their value? Because what it doesn't mean is that they're less valuable. That's bullshit. I mean, that's my thing, right? That's what I've been taught, that I got to be like, no, I don't believe that. Or rather, I have a latent belief of that somehow, right? But I've got to like, just like rip that out of there, because I think that's horrible. That's a horrible belief. What was that one quote from, it was actually in Game of Thrones, I think it was Mira Reed, and she said, just because someone needs help all their life doesn't mean they're not worth helping, right? And I think that's a powerful thought. I mean, because I'm kind of sorry, I'm like rambling.
Oh, this is great. I think was that referring to Bran?
Yes. And how Hodor was helping him, and which is another beautiful story. I don't want to like spoiler alert maybe, but
yeah, if people haven't seen Game of
it's on
Thrones
you.
by now,
It's on you, right?
Yeah, spoiler.
Yeah. Hodor.
Spoiler alert! We could be talking about Game of Thrones spoilers here.
Maybe we reference Hodor and what happens to him. But where was I going with that? Oh yeah, the value aspect of that. Like, it isn't just because they're valuable and you need to give them your help and that's like good and you're a good person. It's not that. I mean, it is that, but it's also, and maybe more importantly, like, you need to learn what it's like to do something for someone who needs you in that way. I mean, there's something you're getting out of that in a lot of ways is more profound than what you're giving them, right? A lot of people can give them water, food, shelter, and a place, love. And my son in particular, my oldest, who's nonverbal and autistic, is actually pretty easy to love, but he's definitely giving you something much more rare than what you're giving him. I mean, an authentic reaction to your personhood. Like, I mean, people tell me all the time. We had one teacher who ran out of the school crying and was like, I struggle with depression, and your son makes me not depressed on a daily basis. He changes my perspective. And I think that kind of ability to step outside yourself and ignore yourself is like, it's sort of golden. I mean, it's not easy to do, especially not for me, right? I don't know. And as somebody who, that's probably why I feel weird saying this, because there's like a genetic element to that, but I think it contributed to when I was a drinker and an alcoholic. I mean, I am still an alcoholic. I just haven't drank for 7 years. There's an aspect of that you're trying to obtain through alcohol, right? If I could just silence that fucking voice that tells me all about the things I'm doing and failing and all my, what everybody's thinking about me, and it's,
Just to put a fine point and underline, what I think you're talking about is when your son, who's nonverbal autistic, like, he's like lacking social awareness in some way, and you've talked about how he can be just really authentic because of that, really touch people.
Like, yes, thank you.
And that sounds,
don't let me jump gaps without filling in the details.
Well, you were kind of implying it there, but and I sort of could follow you because we talked before about it, but I just wanted to make it explicit.
No, please do that. I do have a tendency to do that.
You've told me about like some really beautiful moments where he just is very unself-conscious and honest with people in a way that touches them. Yeah,
like, and I guess I'll tell the story we were talking about the other day. It's kind of like, if you go to like New York City, particularly, and I don't want to pick on New York, but any major city, right? There's like a hardness that hits your heart where you're just like, I cannot engage the pain of people around me, right? I don't have the...
As a resident of San Francisco, like, I know that.
Right. So Luke is two things. One, he lives entirely in the moment, completely present and only present, which is a total divergent from you or I. I mean, I don't mean to speak for you, but certainly...
Trust me.
Yeah. He is.
I'm not in the moment.
He is right there, right? He is in that moment. And so and then secondly, he does not give a flying fuck about what you think about what he's doing, right? He probably cares about you, but he's not wondering if you think his clothing is a particular too drab or not, or whether you think he's like normcore or if he's like a hipster or a nerd, right? He's not thinking about any of that. Or he's not even thinking about if he hurt your feelings. Or maybe he does care about people, but not in the way, that anxiety where maybe you or I might think about an interaction we had with someone 5 years ago where we said something stupid and then feel that feeling all over again, right? So that kind of like agita, or it's not there. And so in that vein, when we were at SciWorks, which is a children's museum in Winston-Salem, and we're just walking around. And I remember the impulse I had. I saw this woman in the corner with her just hands in her head in her hands, and she was clearly weeping. I mean, trying to hide it a little bit, but it was a pretty hard weep. And she wasn't entirely hidden, so part of me was like, maybe she wants someone to talk to her or like ask her what's going on or see if she's okay. And even as I'm thinking about that, just full speed, he runs over to her and just like moves her hands aside and just touches her face and presses his little forehead to hers and just smiles at her and made his noise that he made, bee, like his happy noise, but quietly. And the look on her face was, I don't think I could describe it. It was like somebody actually gave enough of a shit to just step into that, even if they weren't able to do. And I think, geez, man, most of the time, isn't that what we want? Do we really want them to tell us the answer? Probably not. We probably just want somebody to step into it, right?
Yeah. Someone to be there with us.
Yeah.
Someone to see our pain and accept it and not make it, like, let it be okay and not try to make it go away.
Yes, right. Not tell you why it's not a valid pain, right? Not tell you how their pain is like yours and they get it, right? None of that. Just presence, right? And man, I tell you, in a world where I don't know what % of us are taking narcotics to make ourselves feel less depressed or this and that. That has to be I wonder at times which of us is disabled in a way. I mean, because that is to not be burdened with that is a powerful thing. I mean, I know I'm not saying that autism, it very much, and I can tell you about those two, has its very hard difficulties. I mean, he's not independent and will not be, right? But I wonder if that even is a bad thing anymore. I mean, the American idea of independence is, speaking of which, my dog is not independent here.
No.
And wants to be outside of this, so
all right.
Do that. And I wonder how much that has harmed us too. This idea that, like, I mean, the most important thing is that you are self-sufficient, right? Yeah. Or at least one of them.
So I think for a lot of people that aren't parents yet or think of becoming parents, like the idea of having a child with special needs is like one of the scariest things. Like,
sure,
there's some percentage chance, and it's like it's pretty scary. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think I know what you're asking me.
I don't know what I'm asking exactly, but
yeah,
like what's like it probably before you had children. Like, was that something you thought about?
A little. I remember one time, and just this is a good note to, like, we should all be kind of careful. I don't know, but I mean, I had a conversation with someone, and I'm not going to name them, but it stuck out in my mind where we were talking about that topic. And I remember them saying, like, if they were to have a child with special needs, they immediately said, well, that would be the worst, right? That would be the worst possible thing. So that hurts. I mean, even thinking about that now, that hurts. But I know what they meant. And the irony of it all is that, maybe this is not irony, I always get that wrong. But the interesting aspect of it is that what they were thinking of was true, and it wasn't the worst at all, right? I mean, the problem is that what their idea of the worst was to not have the most freedom possible, right? And their view of freedom was leisure time, agency of choice, right? I can do what I want, I say what I do. And man, so first off, obviously children are contrary to that, even typical children.
Yeah. You'll have less freedom. You
will have less freedom. You will have less control of what your day looks like, right? And that's going to be doubly so with a child with special needs, right? But to that I would say, I mean, so that was true. They were right about that. You know, I think what they were wrong about was that is the worst. I think the irony, again, I keep using, what I'm trying to say is that which is hard is not bad. And I think what they were trying to say is to suffer is bad. I mean, like, I was reading something the other day that said that was the number one reason that this current generation didn't want to have children. They didn't want to reduce their leisure time. And there's an aspect of me that's like, you know, you should exercise prudence about when you take on responsibility. I mean, that's valid. But, you know, you can only do that so much before you end up not doing anything worthwhile, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm getting at is the best people in society probably don't think about that. Or there's probably a direct relationship between how little you think about that and how good a life you lead, I would say, probably, right?
Well, that's scary to think about, Matt. Because I have thought about that a lot.
Well, we all do.
I've definitely lived a life like trying to, sometimes I've avoided potential responsibilities to increase my optionality. Like,
yeah, and I don't mean to be judgmental.
I think I think my life is worse off for it. Like, I have had a lot of leisure time, and I can't say when I don't have leisure time, I think about how awesome it'll be, but when I have lots of it, a lot of times I struggle to put it to good use.
Yeah, I mean, look at retirees, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like their primary complaint. I got nothing to do. I have no time, right? Or I have no time. I lack purposeful time, right? And I mean, that's what you'll have in abundance. There's purposeful time, right? You have somebody who needs you, and I'm not saying that you should produce a human being to be needed. However, it is infinitely rewarding to help someone who needs you in that way, right? Isn't that what, in a way, life is about? I mean, is there anything better than serving people you love? Isn't that the point? A little bit.
I dig it.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't have as much of it in my life, but I do dig it.
And you obviously, from our conversations, like, you seek it out. And I mean, yeah. And I think that is a thing that's going to yield benefit. And it doesn't always look the same for everybody, you know? I mean, for me, it looks like this. Yeah, and it's awesome, but
I think the pain, like when people are afraid of a life with a special needs child, there's like the lack of freedom is part of it. And then I think the other bit of pain is like like missing out on your expectations, which you kind of already talked about. Like,
yeah.
Like I expected, it's always hard when you have expectations about something and then it goes a different way.
Yeah, I mean, expectations are the enemy of authenticity, right? I would say it that way. Like, you think about what they do to experiences on a day-to-day basis, right? What you bring into a movie is a simple example. Your reviews you've read, you know, the ideas you have about what it's going to be, they have an enormous influence on your perception of the experience itself. They constantly just water down and poison the actual experience, right?
Yeah, one of my common topics that I talk about is like the danger of becoming a connoisseur of too many things.
Yeah.
Because to become a connoisseur is to like have all these preconceived ideas about
what is good.
Yeah. Like I did it for coffee. I'm kind of a coffee connoisseur, and now when I come to North Carolina to visit my folks, like I sort of like just have lots of negative experiences looking for a cappuccino that's as good as a cappuccino I get in San Francisco. And so I sort of consciously limit I have a brain that wants to become a connoisseur of like all these different things, and I sort of consciously limit myself sometimes and say, like, I'm not going to go looking for the best of X, because if I do that in too much of my life, then I have this layer of expectations over it where I'm constantly can only be happy if I get the best. And
Right.
And it's like it's enough of a pain in the ass that I only am happy with the best cappuccino.
Yeah.
And maybe if I didn't have that expectation, I could just enjoy like a Starbucks cappuccino every now and then.
And let me ask you this question. This is an honest question. I have no like gotcha behind it. But do you feel like, what if you ended up having that cappuccino that all of your experience or knowledge, really, your expectations told you that this is a bad cappuccino, and then you have it, but you actually think it's really, really good? What does that do to your mind or your perception of your own taste?
I think it's really hard to have that experience.
Yeah, like, do you feel like you would deny it almost, or?
I mean, I can imagine that if I didn't have as many expectations, like there could just be like very context dependent, like it's just like the right time where like I'm feeling like I need a cappuccino. And also I have nostalgia around maybe like Starbucks cappuccinos, where like I used to like them before I figured out what a good cappuccino tasted like I can imagine like this confluence of mood with like nostalgia and like sipping on a Starbucks cappuccino and just enjoying it.
Right.
It could happen, but I would need to let go, and I don't know if I could do this, of these automatic judgments that start coming in,
Right.
like as I'm sipping on that cappuccino.
Yeah, and I think you're nailing what I was trying to get at. I think that was really helpful. I mean, like, so you would have to work to eliminate, to basically to let it be what it is, right?
Yeah.
Right. You'd have to do that work to untangle your own. I mean, and that's what I'm talking about, but only at a deeper, more hidden level with children, right? I mean, and I think that sometimes you kind of have to mourn that a little bit and bury that, because it requires exactly what you were just describing. If you just lie to yourself and say, this is what I wanted, right? Because, I mean, if I'm going to be real honest with you, obviously nobody wants their child to have a disability, because it brings them hardship and it's just not a natural want, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of bring that to the table and work through that and go, I see these things and I see that they're dead, right? They're lost. I have to weep that. It's just like, I don't know, an elegy to expectation or something like that, right? And then I think, you can rise from that and breed a new thing, a new view of what it is to be a dad, or what it is to live a fulfilling life. Like, because, it's so powerful and to think about how so many people's like box of what a fulfilling life is not available to Luke. I mean, my oldest son, that is not a thing he can attain. It's just not there. So I would kind of wonder if you talk to them and you'd say, well, what does that mean for that person? And have you considered that person, right? And I mean, honestly, I don't think I would tell you that I had until I had to, right? So I don't think anybody should like feel bad about that. But I think it's a worthwhile consideration. It's what makes diversity actually important, right? Is by actually having those people around, having diversity of interaction with other types of human beings, you begin to think about, oh, well, my view doesn't allow for this person to be that, right? To live the life I think one should live. And maybe I should question that. Maybe I should change my view, right? Yeah.
I can tell how much you love your son.
Thanks. I do. It's I love my son so much, and I love what he's done to my stupid views.
Yeah.
I
imagine there's been a journey of you coming to your current understanding of like what it means to be a person, and what it means to be a worthwhile person.
Yeah.
And like it sounds like I'm getting a sense of like some like internal remodeling you've done
Right.
of your concepts and your expectations for people through this experience.
Yeah, that's well said. It's more like what do they call it? It's like those flip it shows, right? You just got to go in and take like a sledgehammer to some of that stuff. I mean, and you get that from that, your parents and your life and all that stuff. We both went to Wake Forest, and a lot of it is created there. And there's a lot of people coming out of there with like a lot of life expectations, and my parents were super big on like going to a good school, and that's great, right? But that was one I had to like knock out. He probably won't go to college. I mean, won't. I don't know. So now we're going to get to something that I think is extremely interesting, and it's probably, it might be the hardest thing in the world. I think it is. Okay. So I just had that moment where I said to you, he's not going to go to college, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true, right?
Yeah.
However, and this is true for all parents, but I think it's doubly so for people with children with disabilities or special needs, right? So I must accept that truth, or rather, accept the probability of that truth, while still not limiting him, right? Because sure, and by the way, do me a solid, anybody who listens to this, please do not walk up to anybody with children with special needs and tell them, or with autism in particular, because it's so varied in the way it manifests. Please don't tell them about that guy you knew who had severe autism and then 10 years later was, air quotes, normal, and is now this, and that. Please just don't tell that story. If anything comes from this conversation, keep that story to yourself, please.
Maybe we should have a segment where we talk about all the things like not to do around parents with a special needs child in public. Wow. I wonder if there's like a list bigger than just that one.
And what to do. I mean, but that could be a thing for sure. And some of those things might be hard to instill in people because I think there is something, or maybe it's not. Anyway, that duality has to be the most difficult duality in the world, because there's two things that happens in your heart on either of those sides, right? There is a good sort of protection that you give your heart when you say, this person is like my most loved human. I mean, like, this guy is my favorite. My boy's like, and it is just the highs and the lows are wild. And I don't want to lord over them expectations. I don't want them to feel like I'm thinking about how they are insufficient or not who they are supposed to be. Okay? So that's good. That's a big one, right? It's a good one. And the other one is, I also want them to be able to do what they want to do and can do. I want to press them, not press, but you know what I mean? Like, get them to their potential so that they can live the life they want to live. But those two things are absolute diametric opposites in the position of the heart.
Yeah.
One of them is...
It's like the acceptance versus... It's sort of like the mother energy and the father energy.
Yes.
Like the accepting, loving, unconditional love versus like the coach who's going to like help you achieve your potential and push you to do it.
And you must be both. Mm-hmm. So that is the thing that is asked of you. I'm working on it. I mean, that is and
I think this is really good advice or conversation for like every parent of every child. It's like, I think everybody needs to walk that line, I'd guess.
I think so. I would agree with you. I mean, just all you have to think about is like, not to make everybody have like a guilt moment, but I imagine everyone can think about what their parents expected of them. Which means that your kids know, right? If you think a moment, think about your parents, you're like, yeah, I know. And you know where they fell in both those kind of categories, right? I imagine all of us tend in one direction or the other a little bit and try and do both somewhat. I don't know if one of them is better than the other. If I was going to pick, I would probably lean towards the acceptance one, as that is better, I would say. But I'm not sure, because Sometimes the acceptance one is selected just because it's easier, right? And that is not a good thing. That is a selfish thing. Ironically, again, man, I'm using it wrong, I know, but
just use the word. Just say the word ironically.
Okay, I'm just gonna. Hey, caveat. I do what I want with the word ironically, guys.
Just say it.
I'm the Alanis Morissette of this podcast, right?
Yeah. You can be Alanis, and I'll be someone that's not Alanis.
Dave Coulier. No, too weird.
Jacob Dylan.
Who is? Okay, anyway.
He was the lead singer of the Wallflowers.
Oh yeah,
and Bob Dylan's son.
Yeah. Now that song's playing.
And I actually prefer the Wallflowers to Bob Dylan.
Me too. I think he's a better voice. Anyway. Yeah, he does. Oh yeah. So there's an element to which sometimes, acceptance is just not trying, right? Like I love.
Like when you see someone suffering and stuck, like.
Yeah. Or I'll give you an example. In the autism community, so a lot of kids with autism have very rigid diet habits, right? So you could say to yourself, and I knew someone who did this, he'll only eat green M&Ms and Cheetos. This is a real story. And I was talking to this person, and I probably, or I can't remember if it was me or Sarah. It was probably Sarah, or I don't know, but might have overstepped their bounds in being like, well, you can't just feed them green M&Ms and Cheetos. I mean, that's kind of borderline child abuse. A human being cannot be sustained on those things. Even though Cheetos is apparently the most engineered food in the world, but it's not engineered for nutrition, apparently. I think that their point was that is the way he is, and that's who he is, right? And so I don't want to, I just, accept that, right? But a little bit, it's like, are you accepting that though? Or is it just he's very, very hard and you have to put in a lot of work and hours and time to make him eat things he needs to eat, And we had to go through that. It was hard. I mean, we just wanted chicken nuggets. That's what we want, chicken nuggets, right? But you can't just eat chicken nuggets. Man, that would be great if you could. I like them a lot, right? But you have to be both of those things again. You've got to be accepting, but also be like, no, I think this is the thing you need to do, unfortunately. And I'm going to have to press you to widen that. I don't know what that one is. It's like an anxiety or a texture thing, or, just a fixation, obsession. But that is hard. That is hard. Anybody who's ever helped someone through an addiction probably understands what we're talking about here, or through maybe a very hard relationship, right? Just kind of like, you get kind of laser focused on it, and the way to love someone might be a little bit to kind of help them along through that period, But that's all contextual. I mean, you'd have to look at it, but I don't know.
Yeah, when you really love someone and care about them, it's not your interactions with them aren't to do the easiest thing all the time, but you're caring for their welfare, and especially when you're an adult and they're a child, and your picture of the world is just so much more nuanced and complex than theirs is. Like you have a duty to make them upset sometimes for their own good, or in the course of doing something in their own good.
And that is very hard. This is very hard. You were absolutely right.
Yeah, I can't imagine how hard it is. That sounds really hard.
It's pretty tough. Definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, there's the food one. We did that, and then I remember when Luke was first diagnosed with autism, and he was kind of 2.5, and he would I don't know. You get in those modes where you sort of. It's not a fantasy, but whatever a negative fantasy is, like where you sort of drill down to the worst possible thing. Yeah,
it's like a catastrophic thinking, or
like a death spiral kind of thing.
Yeah.
He would go to the top of the stairs and then get on his knees and squint his eyes and just look at the light, right? And for like an hour. I mean, and you would just be like, is this what our relationship will look like, right? I mean, am I just going to have this person here who's in another world, and someone I want to know? It's like having the Pandora's box of like the thing you most want to open is completely sealed off to you, right? That's the terror of it. I love this thing, I want to know it, but I can't. I fear it will be closed off. And so then through years of like, we went into debt for behavioral therapy. We're finally out of that now, which is an amazing thing. After years of that, like that is not a fear I have at all anymore. Like he's not as verbal as you and I, and his vocabulary is probably limited to like a 200-300 words, and there are full sentences that are like phrases, like Chick-fil-A is mastered to the max, or I want fries, or take a bath. But there's also an element to which we are still engaged in such a powerful way. I mean, it's not all just words. I mean, we all know this. It's sort of something we all secretly know that we don't always say, but I mean, there's so much communication going on.
It's funny because like our relationship is so verbal. Mm-hmm. Or my relationship with a lot of my friends is so verbal.
Yeah.
Has it changed like how you think of your relationship with other people?
That's an excellent question. I'm glad you said it because I think it's a beautiful thought. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you've known me for years, and I am a very verbal processing type person, and I think it has completely altered the way I listen to people, the way I understand people. The other day, I mean, just to give another maybe more understandable example, but I'll come back to that one. Is you knew Jamie Dean in college, right?
I'm not sure.
Well, his name is inconsequential in this context.
Well, his name reminds me of the sausages.
Oh yeah,
poor guy.
Yeah, well, and the actor, right?
Oh yeah,
James Dean. Anyway, he is blind, and just to give you a simple example that I think is pretty relatable. So I will go out to coffee with him. And it's kind of actually applicable here too, because we're in an audio only medium, right? So, you know, you talk to somebody and you listen to them and you kind of nod, right, as you're hearing them. But then you realize as I'm talking to him, I'm like, oh, he doesn't know I'm nodding at all, right? He has no clue that I'm like adamantly listening, but giving all these like visual cues, right? But that's useless to him. So then I sort of learned to like, I would modify the way I did that. I would make certain noises or say, yep, and just sort of do that more often when having conversation with him, because the point I'm making is that it teaches you when you interact with somebody with a disability like that or autism, like you learn to adapt yourself to another human being's need of communication, which is, I think that's an extremely valuable lesson and skill, right? I mean, because for so long, especially you knowing me in college, I think you could attest to this, I had one mode, and I mean, like, it was that or nothing, and if you didn't get it, then I didn't really want to deal with that. And I've had to learn that in like profound ways. I mean, just the ways he touches my face, or the way he looks at me, or grabs my hand and moves me. I can tell like the nuances of his movements, the facial expressions. You just sort of learn to listen with everything other than your ears, or even your ears, but not for words, right? And you really do absorb, like, what did they say in those communication classes? They always say, like, 80% of communication is nonverbal, and you're like, I don't know about that. But yeah. But in a human level, like on a one-on-one, sure, not in books, but I mean, you and I here, or me and him there, definitely is true, right? Because like in that moment, in that story earlier, right, did he communicate something to that woman crying in the... Absolutely. And did she know what he was saying? I have no doubt she understood what the message was, right? Way better than if I walked over and was like, hey, I see that you're upset and I wanted to see if you need anything, right? I don't know if she would really believe that, right? But he made himself vulnerable and took a risk and went in, right? So then that's what's communicated. I'm in. I'm also part of your spectacle for you, to be in your spectacle.
Yeah, who's going to walk up to a stranger in a public context and put your hands on their face without saying anything?
Right.
And put your head against theirs. It's like, who's going to do that?
It's extremely risky, right?
It's very risky.
And what do you think they'll do?
Well, that's
Right.
that's the whole point.
Right. You have no clue.
That's why we don't do stuff like that.
Right. You might be totally rejected or completely accepted in a beautiful moment. But and I think what's wild is I think if somebody did that to you, even the way they did it, their posture, the way they moved to you, the way they touched, I mean, all of that would be laden with meaning. That's the word I wanted, right? You would sense all of that. And I think we do. It's why the internet is so insufficient for communication, as much as I love it, right?
Yeah. It's made me, this makes me think about like how uncomfortable I often am around people with a disability. And I think it's because
they're unpredictable, right?
Well, and it's also asking me to change my preferred mode of communication.
Right, sure.
Like, I don't even want to talk to people to some extent. You know, I notice and challenge my own sort of narcissism, but like, I don't even want to talk to people that are like, just have different interests from me. Like, that didn't go to get as much education as I did, because I'm like, oh, they won't be able to keep up.
Sure.
And,
me too.
I have to challenge that. And I think that's kind of the same thing that holds me back from people with disabilities. I'm like, oh, I might have to change how I interact,
and you're right.
And it's hard.
It is hard.
And it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it would probably make me a better communicator. And
I have no doubt it would.
Yeah.
I have no doubt it would.
Get me off my high horse a bit. Learn me a little humility.
It's a problem. I mean, everything you just said, I still do in many moments, right? I mean, so like, I just say that as a journey. It's a journey. It's an ongoing, and the fact that you're even saying like, that self-challenging is the most important piece. This is the most important piece, because it's not something that I think the best goals have no achievement unlocked point. They're never complete, right? And so that is an excellent goal to say, I would like to challenge my internal monologue about not risking myself in interactions with unpredictable people. I think it probably yields pretty awesome moments in life.
Yeah.
Probably some weird ones too, right?
I've heard very amazing things about. There's this man named Jean Varnier.
I've heard that name.
He was a Catholic priest that he became very upset about how mentally disabled people were being treated.
Oh, I do. Yes.
And he started a home for them called L'Arche, which is French for the Ark. And I've heard. And so he started these communities that are sort of built around the idea of the humanity of people with mental disabilities. And I've heard that being in his presence, he's one of the best nonverbal communicators probably that has ever lived, or certainly living now.
Wow.
Because with a lot of the people he works with, they can't communicate their needs. And he is working with them. He's been working with them constantly for 50 years,
right,
or something on that magnitude. And I've heard that if there's one of their residents who's throwing a fit and all the nurses can't figure out what's going on, he'll walk over and just put his hands on them, and like he knows how to touch them in a way that will just calm them down, because he's done it time and time again. And I imagine, like, I heard it, there's an interview with him on the On Being podcast, and like his voice is very gentle. And I just imagine him having this very, very gentle persona that, from descriptions, that sounds like very Christ-like. And I'm like, okay, how do you get to be that? You get to be that by walking the path he walked.
Yep, taking the risk again and again and again. And I also, you tell that story, and I think to myself, are we so different, or are we just walled up, right? I mean, if you were having a really hard moment, maybe that would also be amazing for you, right?
It would be.
Right.
I mean, I think the difference is that, like, I can maybe, like, handle it better, or, like, tuck it away so I can still do other things. But I have a lot of moments where where I'm unhappy. And it
Yeah.
would be really nice if I was around someone who could notice that and give me that kind of presence.
You got me thinking too. I often wonder how often a marital argument is, I mean, we've had so many arguments that not a single one of the words had an ounce of meaning in it. There was all some other narrative unspoken on either side, or something unrequited or unnoticed that was the source the whole time. And in an ironic way, the actual words are impeding the communication, right? They're blocking it. Whereas maybe even just walking over and like looking them in the eye and like hugging them, or pausing and putting your hands on the shoulders of them, and being like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, not even words per se, but like, I don't know. I'm kind of having that revelation now of how many times I just like talk myself in a freaking circle without saying a thing,
Yeah.
Like, even with just simple stuff, like, it's wild when you're married long enough where the other person will be like, no, you're just hungry. And you're like, no, I feel the things I'm saying, and it's very complicated and intelligent, and that's why. And then, slowly as you're like going on your rant, they kind of like slip you a cracker and you're like eating it, and then you're, okay, I was just hungry. But probably you don't see it until hours later after you've gone scorched earth on some stupid semantic point that is meaningless. But maybe it's just me.
Yeah, do you get really cranky when you're hungry, Matt?
Yeah. Tired is more than anything else. The fatigue. I mean, that is an aspect of parenting it's tough. Yeah, probably the toughest in my opinion. Like, when we are in college, I laugh at how I thought I was busy then. Like, it's like a joke level of busy. I'm just like, how did I even? I mean, I had that conversation with a guy I worked with who was younger, just out of college, and he was just getting on my nerves a little bit, if I'm going to be honest, talking about how he felt like he never had time to do anything. And I kind of lost it a bit. Well, not super bad, but I was like, how many hours in a day? And my criteria for this is where you can just go and say, I'm going to do this thing, and you don't need to tell anyone. You don't need to check on anyone. You don't need to make sure someone is in a good state, good place, safe. How many hours in a given day? And I'm counting sleeping hours too, okay? So those do count, right? And he was like, well, I'm working for 8, so like 16. I'm like, I have maybe 1, right? On an average day, and many days 0, right? It's like I'm expected to be here at the office, and then I need to get home as quickly as possible. And then I'm doing that, and I'm like watching. Even when we were talking at the beginning of this interview, or in a podcast, I don't know what to call it, but I was, side checking on Luke, right? And thinking about how he's doing. And now that Sarah's here and upstairs, I can kind of let that go a bit because I've transferred that ownership. Mm-hmm. But that is such a wild difference. I mean, we just had like oodles of time in a given day.
The freedom-loving side of my brain is like really intimidated and scared when he hears that.
Oh, I mean, but you're way more adaptable than you give yourself credit for. Yeah. Because I'll give you the flip side of that argument if you want to hear it, or not an argument, but that point. So there are other nights where I'm like, I have some friends who are, not really engaged in a community. They're not in a significant relationship. They live on their own. And I think about that. This is going to sound really bleak. I should just be honest, though. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I think about the idea of coming home, and that same sentence I said a moment ago, like that if I did those things, that no one would care. No one would be impeded by my absence or presence. No one would notice if I was, in a rough moment, and that kind of makes me like, I almost get short of breath thinking about that, like that crushing loneliness.
I think about, I've done that for a lot of years, and when I was living by myself in a 1-bedroom apartment before, I met my last girlfriend and we started dating, and I moved in with her like not so long after we started dating. And before that, I moved in with in a group home of people.
Oh.
Yeah, but it which is very common in San Francisco because you can't afford the rent on your own. So adults like later in life, like even in their 30s or 40s, are going to be living with friends, which has its upsides, it turns out. But I went from like being alone a lot to being around her a lot, and at first I resented it because I was missing like my freedom. Like I had this person who was just like constantly in my awareness, and eventually I sort of got used to it, and it got to the point where I'm like, okay, this is like sort of interchangeable. Like I can tolerate this. Like this is kind of interchangeable with my life before, when I would get home and like sort of just have lots of time to think and to do whatever I wanted. But then when I lost that relationship, I realized that those two states are not interchangeable. Like I actually was a lot happier when I had that other person in my life. And like going back to having infinite free time whenever I want it, it's a really big burden. And it's not quite as, I don't know what I was looking back on when I was resenting the loss of free time when I first got in that relationship, because I have it again, and it's I don't know why I had that rosy view of it, because it's not so rosy.
I think it's a natural I think it's a natural perspective. Like I don't think you should beat yourself up for it. I think we all kind of sort of think that. It's like we think if the traffic lights weren't there, I could go as fast as I wanted and where I wanted, and not even that the other obvious problem with that, right, is that I'm going to hit all the other cars. But yeah, I think that you obviously, though, like as we talk about it a lot in the last 2 days, right?
Yeah.
You clearly understand it, though, which I think is huge. Like I think that what's happening in that's so hard and different is that we need structure and community. We need it. I think it's almost as critical to the human condition as like water and food. I think it's pretty high up there. Like we were talking about working from home, right? And I was like, the reason I feel like I can work from home now is because I know that structure is present, right? I cannot escape it. So it's like both a constraint, but it's also creating a type of freedom and productivity. It's weird, right? It's like order through, I don't know, freedom through order in some bizarre way. Maybe
in the order that you're talking about at home?
Yeah, so like when I'm working from home and I start at like 8:30, and then I know that the kids will be back from school at 3:30, and then our nanny, who's awesome, will leave at 5:30. So I know once 3:30 comes around, I probably should have stopped doing the kind of work that requires total silence. So I kind of schedule that around that. Once 5:30 comes around, I know I should probably be done with everything, unless it's like hypercritical or it's something that I just need to be on call for or ready for, right? So that's the kind of, yeah, it's the imposed structure I'm talking about. And it's still present when I'm in the office, because I know, well, some of that is, but it's just that it creates that natural imposition, which isn't a bad thing. I don't think that's necessarily, it can be frustrating.
I've heard a lot of parents talk about how people are afraid, especially like very ambitious people are afraid that if they have kids, like they'll lose some productivity. And what a lot of parents talk about is how their 8 to 5 has become a lot more efficient. Like they've cut out all those little like internet breaks that they struggled for years to cut out, and they couldn't. But then when they have the kid, it's like you don't get to work after hours if you want to be a good parent. So like the pressure, the limitations, like changing how they work, and so they can work more consistently. And it turns out that for a lot of people, they actually don't lose any productivity. They just like use their hours better.
I find that super easy to believe.
That's the only thing, that is the thing that makes it like hearing people talk about that makes it less scary for me to want to become a parent, because I think I am a champion at procrastinating and wasting time at work. Future employers listening to this, take note. So,
I mean, it's amazing how much of our structure comes from just imposing the appropriate context, like, yeah, that's really well said. I'm thinking about it from my aspect, like, even with the time with my kids, right? Like, if they're here and I'm watching them, I even sometimes do a better job caring for them. This is sort of analogous, but maybe not directly, but like, so sometimes Sarah will go to the gym and then I'm with both the boys on my own, versus like we're both here, right? So sometimes when she goes to the gym, I have a much better time with them not because I'm a better parent without Sarah, but rather when she's here, there's the same kind of like natural lean on the other person, right? Whereas when she's gone, I'm like, no, I must be completely present and active and watching and attentive. And then as a result, I have better time with them, when the real golden nugget, if you can get it, is how to figure out, and I think you do kind of learn this, it's kind of a skill you can grow with, is how to, when she's here, to be like, I'm going to be that person, right? It's sort of like if people did that, communism would work, right? It's the reason it doesn't work, right? If she and I both were here and we were both like, I'm going to do the most of the parenting work, right? And we both want to parent, but if we were honestly like, I'm going to try and take as much load off her as possible, and she was thinking that about me, it would produce like the best scenario possible. Yeah. But there's just a human aspect to where we both want to do a good job, but sometimes we can't help but be like, but why aren't you doing that thing, right? And so it's kind of like you're saying with the free time, in the sense of like, it's there, right? So why don't I just do it during then and do this now? Or it's just so hard to force that discipline, right?
Yeah.
Because, if we don't like to do things that don't have a result or a purpose, right? So in your head, you're like, but I do have that time later, right? Yeah. And if I do it later, it's the same result.
Yeah, I can't like arbitrarily impose the rule on myself, because it's super easy to cheat.
Right.
And as I get older, I'm getting better at arbitrarily imposing rules on myself, but it's like a skill that it's difficult.
Sure. And I think it's just a matter of, again, going back to the purpose thing. Well, one, it's a little bit of habit, but I think it's also, and I don't mean to talk like I know these things. I feel like I know something about them, but it's also that you're knowing now that it does have value. Like what you're saying, you've learned that you're like, no, it's not just the same, right? It is of value for me to make myself do it always at this time. So then you get better at it, because you're not thinking anymore that it's like a non-value added task. It actually has value to it, and a lot even, right? It's like even trying to I'm probably going to try and do some writing after we hang out and do this. And I need to do that to myself with that, because I even wrote on a paper 1,000 words a week, right? But because I want to impose that structure, because I now know in my life, I almost must have that. If it's not there, things will not occur, right? They just won't. I just don't think we do that, I definitely don't, at least. Sounds like you're in that boat too.
Yeah, my self-management has never been my strong suit, although it's something that I'm starting to get a little bit optimistic about. Like, I think I've found out a mindset that's sort of helping me on it, which a friend of mine, he says that basically, he just put it in a way that really emotionally struck home to me, where he said, habits, I was talking with him about just trying to suffer less. Like my day-to-day experience is pretty high on the existential angst level, like of just like kind of freaking out at being alive and existing, and it's like higher than I want it to be. And so I've been thinking of setting a goal for myself, and I judge it on a 1 to 10 scale. So like 1 would be like perfectly at peace with whatever happens, and 10 is like I need to kill someone. Like maybe me, maybe someone else, but something needs to die.
Someone will die. Yeah.
And like the worst during my last breakup, maybe I got up to like a 9.5. Like I was pretty. It was not a nice time for me or anybody in my care. If I had I was very hostile, and like nowadays I'd say my average is maybe like a 6. Like it doesn't feel very nice. So I said, and some days I get down to like a 4, which is good for me. So I talked to my friend. I said, I've been thinking of just like trying to set as a goal for myself, like lowering my level of suffering, like just not trying to be happy, but lowering my level of suffering, so I can get that number down. And he said, yeah, I focused on that for 4 months once, and it was the second most important thing I've done in my life. I'm like, I liked that validation. I'm like, okay, so it's important, cool, it's something I can do, cool. And then I'm like, wait, second most important thing you've ever done in your life. What's the first? And he said, habits. And I'm like, I'm kind of like, really? And he said, yeah. Basically, 80% of what you do in your life, roughly, is on habit.
Yeah.
That's basically your life. Yeah. It's not the vacations you take or the exceptional things. Like most of your life is the things you get. You do by habit. And so actually the thing is, the most important thing that he's ever made in his life was learning the meta skill of changing his habits. Yeah. And he says, if you can if you can change a habit and gets you 1% more time, that's 1% more time in your entire life. Right. Yeah. Right. And that can make a huge difference.
Programmer understands that, right?
Yeah, so you start doing those 1% things, and it really adds up. And he said the only way that he knows of to effectively do this is to gain this meta skill of changing your habits. And hearing him talk about this, first of all, like I have huge anxiety around like self-management and habit formation because I've tried so hard to do it, and I just failed time and time again. I identify with ADHD label. As well. So, but he said the only way to do it is to pick one habit at a time. Yeah. And like just commit to changing that. And don't do a lot.
Yeah. You always
but just commit to one. Just commit to it. And it's okay if you fail and you like regress, but you must be committed. And you must succeed no matter what the cost. And after you get that one locked down, then you can do a second one. Yep. And as you go along, like you'll get better. And so like right now, the one habit I'm working on is journaling every day. And I've failed at that so many times. It's like kind of anxiety producing for me to try to journal every day because it's not the first time I've told myself I journal every day.
Right. Oh yeah, that's always a hard narrative to fight.
Yeah.
You tried this before.
But it's like, it's not that hard of one. Right. And I'm letting myself half-ass it, saying like, as long as I get some words on the paper with the date above it, and like I'll normally write something more, but as long as I get something down, then it counts. Yeah. And so far it's been like 5 days, but it's been pretty hard. And it's been pretty hard. Like I'm on vacation. Like I could have all these excuses. I could always tell you these excuses.
They're always
for not
there.
doing it. But I'm sticking to it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I'm going to see if I can get it.
I'm a firm believer in what you just described too. I'm currently in the process of doing that with exercising. And I'm over the hump, I call it. So I had, like 3 years ago, I was like about 25 pounds lighter and was running a lot. And then I would get hurt, and then that would break my cycle, and then I would not do it anymore. And just like you're saying, that's like the killer, right? The moment you're not doing it, you don't keep doing it. And now finally, I'm on about a 6 or 7 week trend of doing it at least 2 or 3, or most weeks it's been 4 times a week. This week I've done 2. And even hearing you talk about that, maybe be like, you need to go run, you need to go run, you need to go run. But I think understanding what you said did for me, because I didn't see that way the first time I lost the weight. So I kept pushing myself to, I don't know what, right? Trying to get faster, leaner, I don't know. But this time, my objective is what you just described. My objective is to continue the habit, right? And that's why I think I'm not getting hurt. So now when I'm running and I feel like a tinge or something, I'm like, no, slow down, because your goal is to be able to do this later this week, right? So if you push it now, that's not going to be worthwhile. You're going to not be able to do it again later. And man, it is extremely true what you're saying. And it does have that domino effect, man. It really does. But it's super hard. It's super hard. And I think the other piece that that I would go to what you're saying is like, the reason that parenting does a lot of what we're talking about is because, like your friend is saying, it's very hard to do it yourself, to impose that skill, right? So the other way to make the habit change is just to live in a context where you cannot do the other thing, right? Mm-hmm. So that helps. Like if you got to quit smoking, if you're on the moon, you're going to quit smoking. There's no cigarettes, win. It's not as good as learning what you're talking about, but I imagine it probably helps.
I really want to try to quit caffeine before I'm doing an 8-day wilderness survival retreat in Alaska at the end of July. One of the things you can do when you have no responsibilities, you might as well take advantage of the time.
Yeah, no, you should.
And I want to quit caffeine before I do that. But if I don't, then I'll definitely quit caffeine while I'm there, because we're surviving completely from the wilderness with like just a knife and like building our own shelter and hunting our own food. So unless there's like coffee trees in Alaska,
yeah,
then I'm going to be going without.
There might be. I don't know.
I really don't think there are, given what I know about coffee.
Right. I know little.
So I will be getting off of caffeine this month, one way or another.
As much as I'm not an advocate, at least for myself, of alcohol, I am the inverse of caffeine. I'm a huge fan.
There's things I notice with caffeine that I didn't notice when I was a big user of it that were a problem for me, and that now I advise people about. One thing is I used to have problems with stress.
Is this going to make me stop drinking
Maybe.
caffeine? I don't know if I want to hear it then, but I'll listen.
Or just consider all parts of the issue. One is like I've had trouble with stress at various points in my life. Like I've had when I was an investment banker, I had chest pains, and I went to the doctor at I'm 25, and the doctor's like, yeah, you're nothing wrong with your heart. You're stressed. And what I've discovered in the periods where I've gotten off of caffeine is when I get stressed and I'm not drinking caffeine, I get focused. Because caffeine causes your body to release adrenaline.
Yeah.
And getting stressed causes your body to release adrenaline.
Right.
And when you have both of those things going on, it can turn up the system too much. But if you only have one going on, your body sort of naturally focuses.
Yeah.
You get your natural stress response and it's okay, versus getting your natural stress response and it building on top of the stress response that you've already artificially induced and it becoming too much. So that's something that's cool about getting off of caffeine. Although I'm currently caffeine addicted, so don't. There's a
no.
This is not a current thing. The other thing I noticed was I just slept better.
Oh, that's sure.
And a lot of people, especially soda drinkers, where they don't count the caffeine, they'll say, "Oh, I don't sleep that well at night." And I'm like, "When's the last time you have caffeine in the day?" And they'll say, "Yeah, I have my last cup of coffee at noon." And I'm like, "Do you drink soda?" And they're like, "Oh,
right."
Like it actually has an effect. And when I was a big caffeine drinker in college and university and grad school, I would just have some nights where I didn't sleep, and I didn't know why.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh. There's just some nights you sleep and some nights you don't. And now I realize those nights I didn't sleep, I would, at 11 o'clock, I'd have a Diet Dr. Pepper and play Dota.
Oh my gosh.
And then, by the time I stopped at 1, I just couldn't sleep because the caffeine was going through me, maybe some adrenaline from the Dota.
Dude, I will say, I got into League of Legends for a while, which is basically Dota.
Too.
Yeah. And man, I still can drink caffeine up till 9, 10 p.m. and go to sleep, but not if I play that game. If I play that for an hour or two, I might just be up through the whole night. It just sort of, I don't know, it jacks me up.
Whenever I play a 2.5D game for a long period of time, like the Dota or StarCraft, where you have this kind of slanted photo 3D world that you're looking down on, when if I play it for a few hours and I close my eyes to try to sleep, I actually still see the world like animated. Like I just see characters running around, and like my brain is.
Me too. That's weird. Yeah. And you can't let it go, right? You can't stop thinking about it.
It's like my visual cortex is literally producing that image.
Yeah, I do that too. That's weird.
And most of the time I'm unsuccessful at sleeping with that.
No, it's not easy at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It also just gets you so amped. I don't know.
Oh man, it's the best.
It is a great feeling when it's happening, man. I mean, it's...
Like when you win a close StarCraft match.
Yeah.
It's just like
awesome.
Like your testosterone levels are probably just through the roof. Like you just won like a war or something. Like your side just won a war, and it's.
Oh yeah, it feels just like
that's that circuitry in your brain.
Yeah, I remember that with League of Legends, where I would if I kind of like managed to just out-skill someone, like where it was like a 1v1 in the lane or something, and I would be poking and like coming back and forth, and then do something risky. But then, through skill, basically get out of the risk I'd put myself in and win. That would be like my adrenaline would just skyrocket at that point. Like you do something that really you should lose in that fight at that point, but you basically, because you overmatch them and you're either a maneuverability or something that, yeah. Now there was
you guess where they're going to fire their skill, and you zig out of the way, and then.
Or you stun them, you load them up with like two of the little things, what do they call those, marks with cannon, and then they think they've got you, and then you're just like, and you stun them in just the right spot, and they just had a range.
Right where you see them, like they're firing animation triggering, like you stun them then, and you kill their skill, and then.
Oh, yes. And then you get just far enough away, and he has like a skill shot Q, the range one, where like they think they're going to come out and get one more hit on you, but you lead their position to where it falls right where they're going. Then they die, and then you're just like, yeah.
Good feeling, man.
But 8 out of 10 times, you just get nerfed or just get obliterated because you jumped the tower, and it's like, that was stupid. But that other 2 times, you're like,
it feels really good. Makes it all worth it.
It does feel kind of worth it, even though it's not. Maybe that's why my friends were always like, dude, stop, like, diving.
Yeah.
It was just too much of a mental reward for me to hit that one.
Yeah, the reward's so high that if it just works sometimes, like you feel like it's all worth it. But objectively, if you're trying to win the game,
it wasn't great for the team.
Yeah, it needs to work over 50% of the time to be worthwhile.
And even, never mind, I'm not getting into that.
This is the narrator again, just skipping around a bit. Elsewhere in the conversation, Matt and I talked about breakfast cereals that we remembered from our childhood and the meaning of video games in our lives. Here's that bit.
Worst museum ever would be what that is.
Yeah.
What stuff is stored in? Here's a container for oil. Here's a container for gas. Here is a container for concrete.
Here's a container for cereal that you don't want to get stale.
Oh no, I want to see that one.
Those Tupperware containers.
Yeah,
that rich people have, where they buy their cereal and they put it in another container.
Why would you do that? You were provided a container, sir.
Because you are so conscientious that you want to optimize everything in your life, including like how your cereal is stored.
The only valid argument I could see for that cereal storage method is the transparency of the container, so I can tell what level I am at with cereal. So I know when my demand depletes to the point that I need to re-up on cereal.
But I mean, you can normally just do that by like reaching your hand in when you're unrolling the cereal wrapper,
plebeian method,
and then like feeling around and seeing how much you feel like is there.
Right.
I mean, and that's you have to reach your hand in anyway when you're picking out the best Lucky Charm marshmallows. So,
oh gosh.
Have you ever might as well check the level while you're down there.
Oh man, that's like, if you ever like have just a large bowl of like Lucky Charms.
You know what I really want, Matt? What? I want a device that will automatically filter the marshmallows out of Lucky Charms and the berries out of Captain Crunch.
Like, so you can have them?
Yeah, so I can have them.
I think that's a short-term want.
And then we'll...
I think you reach the tipping point for that. Like, you get that invention, and then you consume, and then I think in a matter of 30 minutes, you're like, I regret this immediately. The ratio was admittedly not perfect, but I've well overshot the.
I used to date someone who would like take the chocolate, like flecks off the top of cakes and cupcakes, like the shaved chocolate, and she would just like ruin everything.
Like to eat it?
Yes, to eat it, including like shared cakes, like someone's birthday cake. Like at the office, she would
shared cakes.
She would like
Fascist.
She would like eat the chocolate shavings off the top when nobody was around because that was the good part. And then I'm so traumatized by that experience. I think I just have like this bitterness in me that I want to like inflict that on the rest of the world so they can feel that pain. And I think by eating everyone's marshmallows out of their Lucky Charms, this is the way to do that.
Oh, so your intent is not for this consumption and the enjoyment itself, but rather the resulting lack of consumption elsewhere.
Also, I just fantasize about having a bowl full of Lucky Charms marshmallows and how good that'll be. And you're right.
What a good world you live. I mean, that is an attainable fantasy.
But I don't want to have to filter them myself, so I want to build a device or maybe pay like some sort of high school student whose labor is cheap under the table illegally to pick the Lucky Charms out of my cereal.
I love that you were hiring an illegal to pick the Lucky Charms.
I mean, I'd say more of an informal.
Yeah. Informal. Yeah.
I may or may not have worked, helping family members for pay, like to do odd jobs around things for cheap when I was like 10 years old, and I may or may not have violated a labor law, but God, did I want $5?
I'm really, the way you phrased that, I'm super curious if you did or not. Just the may or may not throws me for a loop.
May or may not have.
I keep thinking about that first guy you mentioned who's doing you hired him to do the Lucky Charms filtering. Yeah. And I'm picturing him like later in his career and they're like first job and he's like, sorting marshmallows for just a guy I met at Starbucks. And they're like, wow, so why did you take that job? I'm like, just, cause. I have to think that makes them think you have rash judgment at that point, right?
Well, I think like the thing is like $5 is a lot of money when you don't have a lot of money. Like when I was a kid, $5 was a tenth of a video game.
Yeah.
And it's still a tenth of a video game, remarkably.
A little bit under, yeah.
And how else are you supposed to make up a tenth of a video game?
That is the operant question.
Like my primary income at the time was finding quarters on the ground.
Nice.
And which was rare. Pennies were more common.
Yeah.
And earning $5. So maybe earning $5 doing some theoretical work for a theoretical family member, may have been pretty awesome.
Was it though?
It might have been. So
how Shakespearean.
Yeah. Should we talk about?
Yeah, we can. I was just really enjoying that riff, to be honest with you.
No, it was great. I really liked that.
We could ground it in something now. Yeah. What should we ground it in?
Let's talk about games.
Yeah, let's talk about games. What kind? Video or board or both?
Well, video games were pretty awesome when I was a kid. I remember in my last Christmas before my parents converted to a silly religion that doesn't have Christmas, we got a Nintendo. So it was just long. We had Christmas just long enough to get the big prize, which was the NES.
The NES.
I think my dad and my uncle split that, and like they both chipped in some money and bought that for me. And I think video games has had a big piece of my life. I played with my brother a lot.
Yeah, same.
And later my sister.
Yeah.
Mostly my brother. My sister wasn't quite as into him, but once later down the line when we got an N64, my sister would play Mario Kart with us, and she was pretty good. And then there was also just a lot of like honing my own skill, and it felt like a growing thing. Like it felt like a piece of my growth.
Yeah. I think for me it was a lot what you just mentioned, the communal aspect of it. Like that's my first memory, is sitting down there with the 2 controllers and playing. I know we had an NES and I remember that, but my memories are more Super Nintendo related. I definitely, and your comments about religion remind me of this, I have a drawing somewhere where I was really mad that my parents were making me go to church instead of play more Nintendo. So I have a drawing where I told them I was worshiping Nintendo now, the Lord of Nintendo.
I'm sure your parents loved it.
Oh yeah, they loved it. Yeah, and I drew everyone in church, and God was in the background, and he was screaming, "Shut up! Go play Nintendo," which was convenient, right? I was like, "See, that's what he wants." And Nintendo was in there too. I think it was just a anthropomorphic NES, like with, Spawn like eyes, like in the comic where he's got the triangles, and he actually was not very benevolent looking, in spite though I afforded him my worship.
But you might think that a god made from the NES would be benevolent.
You would. He's about entertainment, right?
Yeah.
And what did Nintendo mean? I think it was named after, Nintendo was like a card game initially, and Japan meant like joy cards or something like that.
I don't know. But NES stands for Nintendo Entertainment System.
Right, and they named it that because apparently the Atari was flopping, and they didn't want it to be considered a game system. They wanted it to be an entertainment system. So like a living room kind of centerpiece rather than just like a gamer thing. Which I think that supposedly worked as far as a marketing campaign. But it's weird how people do that. Like how Jobs did that with the PC. He was like, once you get it in people's home, they'll realize its usefulness for you, which I always thought was interesting. And that's kind of what happened with Nintendo. Call it what you want, but once people put their hands on it, they'll make it what it is. There's got to be some kind of Greek name for that or something.
I don't know.
There should be. The telos, right? That's the telos. It's sort of auto-realized. It can't be impeded.
Yeah, you get the vision of the telos.
Yes.
And you put your Nintendo on it, and it'll lead you forward to the television. Telos vision.
I wonder if those words are related.
Well, certainly.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, there's only so many words, right? You can't just...
Eventually, they have to be. So yeah, I remember. I don't know why I did this. I was really close to my older brother, and he was super competitive. And like we would play like Street Fighter 2, and I remember enjoying it so much that, oh man, if he ever hears this, he's gonna be like, "This is a lie. You're just bullshit." But he would get really mad if he lost like 2 or 3 in a row, and I was super good with Chun-Li. I'd just get that lightning kick up, get you in the corner, and it was just done.
Yeah, cheese tactics worked really well in family games.
Yeah, and so I would actually intentionally lose after a little bit in order to keep it going so everybody was happy, because he would get so inflamed with it that it was like, I don't know, he just couldn't pull it back. And then once he won 1 or 2, then he could.
Yeah.
And I think as an adult he says now he sometimes won't play certain things because he's like overly competitive. I don't know what drives that.
So one of Jordan Peterson's riffs is he talks about how rats like to play together, but if the bigger rat doesn't let the little rat win, like at least like about 1/3 of the time, the little rat will like stop wanting to play. So you gotta let people win sometimes.
Yeah, it's kind of like why nobody likes the NBA anymore. Everybody's just packing all the best players on one team, and it's not fun if it's just like an absolute domination.
My best game was probably Mario Kart Battle Mode.
Oh yeah, with the balloons on Super Nintendo.
Super Nintendo I was pretty good. I also played a lot of the N64 version. If I go to a bar that has Battle Mode set up nowadays, which is rare, but occasionally you'll find like someone with like classic games. I could play it all night and never have to step, because it's just like drilled into my fingers. You never know how good you are when you're a kid, and you're only playing with your. I only played with my siblings, like sometimes 1 or 2 friends, but I think I'm actually like pretty good at Mario Kart.
That's an interesting phenomenon you bring up, because That did change everything when they kind of made it where you could get on the internet and play other people.
Yeah, ranked ladders and all that.
Yeah. You kind of went from like caring about your neighborhood. We can move outside if you want to.
So we were talking about video games. Is that still a topic we want to continue on?
Sure, yes. Or,
You're talking about how the internet changed everything.
yeah, I feel like it used to be the case where, and I don't know, I guess you could say this is good and bad. I think it's mostly bad, though. I think it's mostly bad. So before it was like, you had your group. It was kind of like playing pickup basketball with a couple of guys, right? You enjoyed it because it was like, unless you happened to be in the same neighborhood as like LeBron James, you probably were at least moderately competitive with your friends. And so you had the enjoyment of like real competition and advancement and camaraderie. But the internet made it so like you can play against anyone, right? And so I think some people are challenged by the idea of, I don't know, maybe not challenged. Maybe it just requires you have a better understanding of your purpose to know that it's okay to advance from like number 13,870,000 to 13,500,000, right? But I don't know if that resonates well with the human experience.
Yeah, I do enjoy online gaming. I got like kind of okay at StarCraft 2.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that was really fun. But like I wasn't making friends. And there's something different about it. Like I wonder if there's just like making your status in the hierarchy more objective is maybe like reduces the overall amount of satisfaction people can feel, because before that everybody can have an overestimate of their own ability.
Yeah.
You just feel like, yeah, I win sometimes against my friends. I probably beat them most of the time, but really you win like a third of the time.
Yeah.
And then like but you're not counting. And now it's like,
it's calculated for you and shown. So I think that's a huge piece of it. And then I think it's sort of forcing on you the one aspect of the definition of what the game is for. You know what I mean? Like, I think that maybe games are supposed to be for actually us sharing an experience, right? And enjoying our time together. But instead, I no longer see the other person, number one. We're not co-located. And I don't think I need to speak too much to the nature or the quality of the community of online interactions, right?
Yeah.
They're fairly toxic. And then it becomes only about the win and the ranking kind of system, which used to be like, I imagine most people, even with their friends, didn't ever say, you're the best, I'm second, he's third.
I mean,
maybe, right? Maybe.
I'm really competitive. It's a character flaw.
But at least nobody would know, right? It was not for sure, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of...
Yeah, I could talk smack all I want, but people didn't have to agree with me.
There was a healthy element of ambiguity, right? I mean, yeah, and it was smack talking a little bit too. And I think that does speak to a topic that is, I think, one thing we were talking about the other day that is, I don't know, super interesting. It's... If we're not going to be the best, right, and we're probably not going to be.
Almost certainly.
Like very, very high
No,
probability.
you don't want to be the best.
And maybe you don't even want to be the best.
Because if you look at the kind of life that it takes to be the best at a competitive video game, like you have to drill that thing 8 to 10 hours a day, like 6 days a week minimum, and I think the game's going to lose most of its flavor by then.
Yeah.
Like it's like gum that you chew too much, you know?
Yeah. Perfect analogy. Yeah. Eventually you're just chewing your own teeth, right?
I'd guess. I'm not sure exactly how it feels to be like Faker.
Nice reference.
But like maybe if you're like the very best, like the glory makes up for it. But surely if you're in the top 100, like you're suffering just as much as Faker does in training and not having that many teenage girls scream your name.
Right. No, I think that's it. And you know, the truth is that that is the vast majority of people, right? And so, I don't know, you look at, I keep hearing people say, oh, it's different than like football, it's different than like basketball. And my gut says that that's true, even though semantically and logically I'm like, it's not. But then I finally thought about, it is different, and it is because of what we just mentioned. They are still co-located when you're younger and you're playing those other sports, so they have incidental like relationships and community that are coming from that. And that's like what I was talking about the other day. You know, I think that
there's a lot of other really cool things about basketball and football too. Like, like the rules aren't like quite nailed down, so you're like constantly negotiating them with your friends, and you're learning how to do that. And instead of it being mechanized, like within the structure of the game, you get exercise at the same time that you do them.
Definitely.
Which video games do work out. I think your coordination and your reflexes.
Yeah.
But they're not. You're physically suffering. Like your body isn't gonna become more healthy like while you do that.
No, you're not gaining health points. That's for sure.
Yeah, you're losing HP.
You're losing HP.
Your max HP bar is going down.
Or at least it's stagnating, right? Yeah.
Certainly not going up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think you're getting at it. Like, the negotiate, that's what's the word I'm looking for? That's an integral life skill. To go, we don't know what the definition of the rule is here. Let's compromise and have a conversation and incorporate each other's skill sets and define what it's going to be, right? So that we can hopefully have max enjoyment for everybody here. It's a very economy way of talking about that, isn't it? Max utility.
You were an econ major?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The and like when someone says it's a foul and someone else says it's not a foul, and you have to hash that out. Like there's a lot of just like social skills being learned, and like even in the parts that are unpleasant, where you're like fighting with some. Mostly
the parts where it's unpleasant. Yeah. I didn't even think about the aspect you're bringing up. It might be the most important part.
It's probably the part that gave me the most anxiety as a kid because I didn't have my social skills on lock. But you know, I was probably learning something that's. I probably was learning something that's useful to me now.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that it's one of the key things that a lot of kids, I say kids, but I mean like probably people in the 18 to 25 range. Can I call them kids now? I'm 35.
Yeah, I call them kids.
I feel allowed to.
I think we can call them larvae.
Larvae, yes. Or what are the zerglings, right?
Zerglings, yeah.
Yeah, the hive.
I mean, they're not larvae, but pupa maybe.
Well, it speaks to, what's the primary criticism we always hear, at least, and I feel like I've definitely seen this, although I think we're on the cusp of millennials, but the primary criticism we hear about millennials in the workplace, right? They require explicit direction and growth. Like they want to know how they're growing and where they are. Well, what teaches you that? Well, video games. That's a video game logic, right? I'm level 5. I know I am because I did da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm not ripping on video games. As you well know, I love video games. But that gray nuance of like, am I going to get what I want? Did I achieve what the boss wanted? Like, should I just figure out what to do next? Like, that's the stuff that's like important in a job, right?
Yeah, like the ability to... So the thing that video games give you with regards to progress is it makes it very clear and explicit. So there's this word called legibility, which is basically about making, like, whether things are clear and explicit. And like the thing is that in life, most of the time, like, progress isn't legible to you, or it takes a lot of work to figure out how much you've progressed. And if you can provide an environment for people where their progress is legible, that's actually really hard and valuable to do. That's basically what someone that's managing a large group of people is trying to do.
Yes.
It's like a key management skill, but it doesn't happen automatically.
Oh no, yeah, right.
It's like you're programming the work world for other people when you're doing that.
You're building the world in which they're going to level up, right?
Yeah.
and you need them to be able to see it. Man, that's so important too. And you know what else it does? And now I'm going all over them. I'm, what's the word I'm looking for? Riffing. I'm ADD in it here. So
yeah, we're going to riff on this for a bit, and then have another topic. But
okay,
let's see where we go.
I might be able to take it to the topic.
I know you're really good at that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate this kind of you to say.
I want to get to fatherhood.
Okay, so this is going there a little bit.
Okay, cool.
So.
Just giving you the direction to riff in and see if you can connect the dots.
That. Yeah. So as the father of a child with special needs, what terrifies me about that rubric, is that the right word? I think it is that it's sort of ingraining a generation into the idea that the way to achieve things and be happy is extremely finite. It's very legible, like you said. And I think that's limiting. I think that's a myopia. It's a self-imposed myopia, but it's like, it looks like doing this as a woman or this as a man or this as a relationship, or you know what I mean? Like you get in that habit of being
achievements.
Achievements and unlocking achievements, right?
Narrator interlude. And finally, Matt and I return to the topic of video games for one last time to finish out the conversation. Narrator interlude out.
Do you ever have a problem with? I mean, I feel like we're like at the length where I should wrap up.
Okay.
It's just my brand. My brand's like 60 to 90 minutes.
I think that's probably. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Do you ever have a problem with video game addiction where you've like cut back, or like what's your thoughts about like where video games fit in your life?
Man, so that's sort of falls into the same conversation of earlier, where I think what happened was when I started working on my game and then with the kids, like you start to not, I don't know, you want something that actually makes something, for one, which I love video games, but generally they don't do that, right? You can't leave with a product that you have or something you can share. And the other thing is like you get such a premium on sleep, right? That you cannot have that day we just described, like that looks like hell the next day if that happens to me, because they're going to get up at 5:30 and they still need all the things they need, and you still got to be engaged. So like you do that enough times, I don't know, a lot of men still kind of stay in that cycle, but I felt like I probably now play what I would consider an extremely healthy amount of video games, like in the neighborhood of maybe 3 to 5 hours a week is max. And most weeks, there's definitely many weeks that pass where it just is 0 without thinking about it. It's probably never like anymore, like even above 10 in a whole week, which kind of maths out. And that only happens if like my brothers will happen to buy the same game, and then we'll get on like Google Hangouts chat and play it together. And then at that point, even I would say, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's a good thing, right? You're kind of getting to catch up and do something together. And so it's the ones that I like we're talking about, like where, geez, I wasn't even that good at either of those games, StarCraft 2 or League of Legends. I got close to gold with League of Legends, and like,
what was your highest rank in StarCraft 2?
Like, I think I got almost gold. I was mostly silver. Wasn't that good. Because I wouldn't, you know why?
Why?
And I didn't play League of Legends nearly as much, but I was still rising when I was gold in League of Legends. And I realized the difference for me is, at least the way my brain is, I'm a very, very talented micro player and a very not talented macro player. So it's like League of Legends is almost like removing macro.
I'm probably opposite.
My older brother is also the opposite.
Yeah, I'm a much better StarCraft player than a League of Legends player.
And Andrew is too. Yeah, and I would say that, and just like you are pointing out as well, like in StarCraft 2, you cannot usually out micro your macro. It's the inverse almost always, right? I mean, so I think that was why. I refused, I don't know why, but I would never just like learn a build order and a counter build order, and you kind of got to do that stuff, right? I still probably should.
I don't know that I learned it. I just watched so many pro games that
Sure.
It's just kind of like I knew all the strats.
Yeah. And in League, it's like, as opposed to rock, paper, scissors of like Zerg, Protoss, humans, although they don't quite, rock, paper, scissors. But my point being, you can't, it's not a hard counter from champion to champion because there's like a 200 of them or so, right? So that actually works in my favor because of my struggle with that. Being able to do that, it's less important in the other context, right? If I though build like, I'm trying to even remember what the counters are, but if I build a bunch of zealots, right, and then you build those flying zergling things, I mean, that's just a hard counter, right?
Yeah, Mutalisk, yeah.
Yeah, there's no...
Yep, zealots aren't going to do anything against Mutalisk. Except you could rush their base with the zealots and try to like get enough economic value to make them worth it.
But in League, like even though that champion might be like the best champion against my champion, it's usually not just like that. Like you can't do anything, right? Because in StarCraft, if you built wrong, it doesn't matter how good I am with zealots, right? I'm screwed, right? Or positioning, all that other stuff. Those are my weak points in games, I would say.
I used to love the Zerg v Zerg matchup just because they had the exact same tools I had, and it was just all about skill.
Yeah.
And it was all about like scouting and guessing what the other person was doing, controlling my units, and especially probably the way I won the most was by like noticing when they were doing an inefficient strategy, and which they would try to get away with it by just like relying on me to like not attack. Right. And I'm like, okay, they're building a second base early in Zerg v Zerg.
Right.
Like that is actually a losing strategy.
Yep.
And they're used to someone like not noticing, and like that's like an easy example, but I could just tell like,
that's one I did all the time.
Like these are not professional strats because they're inefficient, and then I know how to punish them.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like whatever skill I had in StarCraft was mostly like that kind of macro oriented thing, where probably came from watching like every freaking pro match that's ever been.
That's how you learn stuff.
I'm just like I knew when someone was like sort of outside the range of what was maximally powerful strat, and then if they were going to beat me, they would have to like out micro me after I had the army to beat them.
And just to give you an idea, just to double down on that same idea, the only game I've ever been like exceptional at, I would say, is Smash Brothers, and it is like exactly what it is only what we're talking about. Yeah. It is all like, I'm looking at you, I see you're gonna do that, duh, duh, duh. It's all timing, right?
Yeah. See, just thinking about that gives me some anxiety. Like I'm like, there's no way I could ever be that good. And
no, you can. I mean,
probably would. I just don't. I just had to start watching the pro Smash Brother players and like figure out like what I needed to know. But still, like there's something about that. I have pretty fast reaction speed, so probably I could be a micro player. But there's just something in me that like, just I never wanted to. Like, it's just not the thing I enjoy.
I think that everyone can learn the reaction speed, right, and the speed of doing your moves. I think what then differentiates you into becoming exceptional from that point is the people, once you get the ability to do something and then still be doing what you're doing and look at what they're doing and then guess correctly what they will do next and then do the thing that counters that before they do it. And if that is what makes you like I would play with people who weren't as good, and it wasn't like, oh, he's beating them. It was like they aren't landing a hit, because you're just like, you're going to do that, you're going to do that, you're going to do that. And it's like chess in that way, right? Like a great chess player doesn't like
the ultimate speed chess. Like,
right.
Super fast.
They used to use StarCraft for that, actually, where they used to like monitor the brains of people playing chess, and they switched to StarCraft apparently. Just because it is, I think, a lot similar in that way too.
So we're just about out of time. Is there anything? Should we end on a serious note? That's kind of my brand.
Okay. We can do that. How do we end on a serious note?
Okay, maybe not a serious note, but
okay.
Is there anything that you would say to people listening to this to sort of put a bow on it?
Yeah, I would say Let me think. I got multiple things, maybe even. I would say first thing is, if I want to put a bow on it, I think if you try and spend all your time avoiding suffering, that'll be the best way to find a lot of it, and not the kind you want. And in that vein, I think that hardship is... I don't think anything worth doing is easy, and I think avoiding hardship is probably, well, like I was saying, that's probably the best way to have a terrible life. Now, I don't mean terrible like you'll be like a dictator. I mean terrible like it'll just be ash in your mouth, you know? Like, I don't think it'll work out. And in that same line of reasoning, I think you should seek out the person crying in the corner, and the person struggling, and the person who's different, and, you know, use your strength for mercy rather than for your own elevation, right? And I, even though I don't think that that's the point, I do believe it will end up being more rewarding for you in the end. I strongly believe that. But it will be hard as shit. Yeah. Yeah, there. That's my bow.
That's good bow, Matt.
Thanks, man.
Let's end there. Good talking to you.
You too, buddy. Love ya.